At 10 times the average radiation levels in the country, how worried should families like Ayoko's be? Well, I'm bringing David Brenner, who is Director for the Center of Radiological Research at Columbia University, to answer that. It's a pretty simple question. I would expect that they should be really concerned, shouldn't they?
I don't think they should be so concerned, Becky. If you were to do measurements on houses on the east coast of the USA, you'd also see variations just like that, factors of 10 differences
really?
in low-level radioactivity. Different rocks have different amounts of radioactivity in them. There is certainly contamination from Fukushima all around Japan, but I really doubt that this is actually much to do with that.
All right, so let's just remind our viewers that we are all exposed to radiation on a daily basis. It's, of course, measured in units called a sievert. The average is, I think I'm right in saying 3 millisieverts a year. But at the time of the Fukushima disaster, radiation levels were measured as high as 400 per hour. Just over a year later, it's a different story. The WHO didn't take measurements inside the 20-kilometre restricted zone, but in the area between 20 and 30 kilometres away, people are exposed to radiation doses of between 10 and 50 millisieverts per year. For the rest of Fukushima, it's less, between 1 and 10. Most of Japan, between 0.1 and 1. For neighbouring countries and the rest of the world, it's pretty small, isn't it? Just set what we are learning from Japan, and specifically Fukushima, within the context of what we know to be the rest of our lives, as it were, for those of us who aren't watching from Japan.
Well, we are exposed to radiation, as you say, all the time. So these are very small additions to the natural radiation exposure that we have anyway. The numbers that you gave are actually just for the first year after the Fukushima event. But we also have to think actually about lifetime exposures, the next 30 years, shall we say. And those doses are going to be somewhat higher. Still on the low side. We're still not talking about high risks. We're talking about low risks, but we are talking about a lot of people exposed to these low radiation risks.
And David, as you speak, I'm considering just how this really stacks up a year or so on to a disaster like, for example, Chernobyl.
It's a little bit smaller than Chernobyl. It's certainly the same sort of thing. It's probably, in terms of doses and ultimately risks, perhaps about 5 times smaller than Chernobyl. And the real reason is that most of the radiation coming from Fukushima ended up in the Pacific Ocean, whereas Chernobyl is landlocked, so all the radiation fell on land. Now, the material that fell into the Pacific Ocean will get into our ecosystem eventually, but it will take a very long time for that to happen.